When I was up there speaking, I said, who programs? And all these hands went up. And I said, not a single one of you are the same. Everyone programs based on their experience, their applications, based on who they've known, the type of machine that they're on. Everyone's different. And therefore, if one company had switched out each programmer on the same job, that cost would be different because every single person's different. So one of the biggest and most important things that you have to understand as a company who's producing a part that matters and you need to get time down is, who is your programmer? What is their mentality? What is their mindset? And are they striving for just being obsessed to just keep perfecting the art, you know what I mean? And keep getting better, and an obsession for perfection.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
I love the way you say that the programmer is the one that dictates the pace of the shop, because 100%. That is so true.
Yeah. It's like if you walk onto a floor and it's making $1 million worth of product, there will always be an alpha programmer. There'll always be one guy that started there at the beginning or gained the respect from other people, or, you know, however he got there. But that person is the one that dictates it. And other people are kind of underneath that person if there's many different programmers. And if that person is amazing, the entire floor will be amazing, so long they have good documentation, they understand how to do standards, and they all kind of rise to that person's level. But if it's like a zoo, you know, and you have different people running different tools, I mean, the same tool in different ways, like you guys were talking about, and it's just all in disarray, then you're going to have major problems. You know, but you bring in the right person, that person will be able to look at everything, and by just adding certain standards, not just standards in tools, but in surface foot, chip load, depth of cut, all of it for each type of material and application, by adding these in and making it law for all programmers to do the exact same thing, or bring something that's better to make that the standard, then the entire company will rise, because the price to manufacture the parts will decrease, which gives you a better profit, which allows everybody to get paid, which the culture will get better. It changes everything. One person. And if your head programmer does it the same way and he's not willing, then that person needs to be fired. And I'm sorry for anybody. I've literally gotten people fired over this. And you have a whole company that's staking everything on your decision making. And if you're not constantly striving to be better, if you're not a true leader and you're not like bringing the heat as far as just making everything flow perfectly, then you should not be in that position.
So good. It's funny. It's like there's really this kind of balancing that, because you want to be consistent, you want to develop standards, you want everybody on the same page, but you also have to be able to step back, look at the situation, and be willing to innovate. Like you say, if somebody comes with a better solution, you have to be willing to look at that and perhaps give it a chance. You have to be willing to change at the same time.
And sometimes you don't want to just if a job's running forever, you don't want to just stop the machine, let it blink, go put in the end mill right there. And that's why it's important to, after work or on a Saturday or something, throw like a little test party, you know, and be like, hey, we're going to actually take some monster cuts, we're going to murder some material, and we're going to see what these things can do. And if we can actually find something better, then we will go and change the original programs that are running on the machines and make that law.
And usually it'll blow your mind too, the results. I mean, think about how many tests we've done, and it's like, holy cow, you know, we've been leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table and didn't even know it.
Well, so many people don't track that data, right? They never get it, and they just have no idea.
Well, you can look at like drilling steel or stainless, and you still see people doing high-speed steel. Or they'll go to a carbide end mill and they're still feeding at like 18 inches a minute. You know what I mean? And 2 inches a minute, you know, at 18 is probably fast. And then they're just taking these small pecks and stuff. And they're drilling so many holes, and they're not thinking that you could actually go to one of the higher end drillers that are designed to break the chips and designed for that specific material. Like Kennemet has some of these drillers like in steel. These things are running at like 100 to 200 inches per minute in steel. You know what I mean?
Or like us, 2,300 inches.
2,300. that's on the end mill, but on the drilling, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, boom, you know, just murdering it.
Yep. I love new tooling and I love innovations, and people, I think, a lot of times don't realize how much money those things can make you if you're open-minded and you bring in.
Well, that's where it starts, right? Being open-minded, because I'm living proof of what you was just talking about. Like, I'm not saying I was that alpha programmer you were talking about, but I was asked to do a process document for tight tolerance parts. So I had to write up, this is the procedure that we do, because a lot of the parts that I was getting was those tight tolerance parts, and they were generally coming out good, but we would hand it to same type stuff to another programmer, and it might not, and it would be a completely different process. And so I was asked to create a document like that, said, take your processes that you're doing and some of the other programmers that's working, and let's create this document so every programmer follows this. Like, if you're doing this tight tolerance hole, it has a 3,000th true position. This is how you do that hole, and stuff like that, you know. And that was made it so much better once we had that document in place.
You can get a lot of different variants, and even from your programmers, even down to your setup guys. If you have a difference between your setup guys who do your tool hangouts and stuff like that, your fixturing and stuff like that, I had to write up several process documents as well, just for setup techs and stuff, like on the lathes, and making sure that, you know, you hang a boring bar out a difference of 1.5 inches, and that can change your entire program. It changed everything. Now your program is no good, and now we'll go changing your program when it wasn't the program at all.
Yeah, it was how you set it up.
It was just a simple setup, you know. So you want to see that consistency all the way down, right? From basically your programming to your setup to even your operators. That consistency is key.
100%.
And it's not just good for the company, you know, it's good for every machinist on the floor. They know what to expect. They know what to do.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, everybody gets in that same rhythm and groove, and just, you know, you start making real money when that happens.
Yeah.
So I think that running tools is something that every shop, like figuring out your standards, figuring out how to push them, getting to that sweet spot, standardizing it, then allowing all your programmers and machinists to actually run off the same standard unless they have something better that is tested and proven and replaces the current standard. So I also think that when you get to that point, going to talking about ways that shops can improve, right? So advancing your programming techniques, your tool path techniques is everything, right? Your tools, your standard tools, and then looking at the different parts that are actually on your floor and taking certain machines and standardizing those machines. If you cut a lot of steel, then you cut a lot of stainless, you cut titanium and Inconel and aluminum, taking different machines and taking those applications and kind of standardizing them to certain machines. So this machine is where we do all the aluminum. We don't just, you know, it's due right now and this one's open, so we're just going to put it over here where we mostly run steel over here, and then next week it'll be over there, and then the next week it's going to be over here. Actually figuring out, you know, your scheduling so you can run most of your different like materials together, and then really focusing on taking your standard tools that, like an end mill. If your sweet end mill, your sweet spot for an end mill is a 3/4, that's where you're willing to spend that money. To go bigger, you don't quite have the horsepower. It could be a 1/2 inch, and you just feel like this is the size that we use the most. Standardizing the actual tool magazine or the carousel so that you actually have those end mills in place, and you program off of those tool pockets so that you can start alleviating like all that setup, get rid of all that setup 100%. And stuff. Then running, like, put all the tools for stainless steel, you know, drills and tools, and put all like parts together. When you can start doing those types of things, like you look at these aerospace companies, and we're talking about tube fittings, and we're talking about different types of parts where they're so similar. They might have a few different types of ports. They might have different, you know, tube ends or whatever. And it's like, you know, getting the boring bars, the drills, and the end mills. The end mills are so universal, and actually, you know, figuring out pockets where these are all end mills, then I'm going to have, like, you know, boring and drilling and different things, and leaving them in there, and then just because that's a huge money savings.
Yeah, setup is what kills most shops
every time.
And a lot of management don't understand that. You know, like, I've seen so many places where they'll give you 15 minutes for every setup, and it's like, well, no, this setup is going to take me 6 hours, and they'll come out
or 2 days.
Yeah, or 2 days, or longer. And, you know, since they don't understand that, they have no trouble, you know, telling people, hey, pull that job off that machine. We'll come back to it later, and set up this job.
Easy
here.
peasy, right?
worst.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, it took us days to get this dialed in and everything perfect. And they're like, well, why? No setup should take longer than 15 minutes. And it's like, sorry, they do.
Yeah.
So anytime you can make it to where you have even one less tool that has to be assembled, it saves a tremendous amount of time and money when it's extrapolated across a year.
It does. Over tool and setup after setup after setup. You think about even on a lathe. I mean, if you're going from aluminum to stainless steel, you're going to be switching out all those inserts. You got different grades. You might have different, cutting edges and whatnot. And that stuff adds up.
Yeah, and like you're saying, standardizing even your tool numbers and stuff is because right on top of all that setup, you'll have, if you have a lot of programmers, I've got this programmer he just brought me the next job, and he's using the same tools, but guess what? They're all in different tools. Yep. Well, then you're either got to change them all, or I'll just change my numbers, and then you fat finger a number, and you end up crashing the machine.
Mm-hmm. You forget one H2 and it's game over.
And that just takes time too, over and over doing that job after job.
Yeah, I think this is a good conversation because a lot of companies are looking for ways to save money and drop costs and do all that. And they're looking at automation. And 100% automation in the future of CNC machining is standard practice. And you're not going to bring the work back without truly getting it. But
absolutely,
we're talking about all of it.